Hey, I'm Kim.
And I'm Poncho, and you're listening to Now That You See It, a show that will ruin you for boring conversations forever.
It's about the invisible stuff that shapes how we think and connect those, oh, wait, what? Moments that change how you perceive the world around you.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Judy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to our guest episode.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah. We are really pumped to have you on and would love you to introduce yourself. But this is, just to give folks a quick preview, this is one of those episodes where there's mind-blowing stuff that you're going to be sharing with us that may really change and recharacterize how people think about their own mind and their own body. So why don't you introduce yourself and then share with us what you can't unsee now that you've seen it.
Great. So my name is Judy Hu. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Massachusetts, trauma therapist of 20 years turned boundary coach. I am going to be talking a little bit about what boundary coaching is and how I invented it and why.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the trigger warning a little bit in case folks have aversion to talking about suicidal ideation. I'm going to talk about that, is where I start in the story. So like maybe 10 years ago, I was waking up regularly with suicidal ideation. On paper, my life looked perfect. Married, 2 wonderful kids, successful practice, full wait list, owned a home, all these things. And I would wake up every day overwhelmed and desperate, feeling trapped in my life. And then at one point I decided I needed to end it. And it wasn't the life that I was ending, it was just the life that I had created that was revolving around pleasing everyone else except for me. And so how this story unravels a little bit is I always thought I was the issue. So I grew up in a home, immigrant family, stressed out parents, working class. We owned a restaurant. My mom wasn't happily married. She didn't have many choices. Her dad died when she was young, and so their family fell into poverty. And so one of the ways out was forced marriage. And so what happened was her misery at lack of choices fell onto me as a child, right? So because she couldn't blame her mom for the choice, she couldn't blame her husband at the time. The offshoot was blaming the child, which often happens when parents are really under-resourced or struggling with mental health issues. And so I'm going to pull in a resource that I use regularly as Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands. And he talks about trauma decontextualized in a person looks like personality. So my mom's trauma that got
Wait, Judy,
decontextualized was...
you said something very powerful. Can you just say that one more time? Trauma decontextualized in a person is
looks like
personality.
personality, yes. So basically, if you don't see the trauma that the person has, it turns into what we perceive as personality. So my mom's trauma my mom's trauma was this early loss of her dad and then poverty. How it manifested in her body and her being was high anxiety, highly critical, everything needed to be perfect, because it was a sense of control over her life. So she became very harsh and critical and was miserable. So was trying to kind of make sure everything was the way that it could be and needed to be. The next line of Resmaa Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands is trauma decontextualized in a family looks like family traits. So it looks very much like an East Asian family. I'm Chinese American, right? First to be born in the US, high achieving family, everything looked perfect. And so the trauma that got decontextualized was because my mom was so critical and threatening if we didn't do what she needed, everyone became perfectionists and performers, right? To please mom, to make sure everything was calm so we didn't get her upset or we didn't get in trouble or different things that would be punishments for us. And then the last thing, trauma decontextualized in a group of people looks like culture. So what's interesting about this is there's like the perception of tiger mom, the Chinese tiger mom. Where that comes from is
I
doesn't
don't
know
know
it.
the Chinese
Yeah.
tiger mom. What's a Chinese
Gosh.
tiger mom?
let me inform you, Pancho. So there's a book, I don't remember the author, but it's called Tiger Mom. And it talks about tiger moms being like the Chinese parenting style is like a tiger mom. Very high expectations, no complaining, you just do like a tiger. It's kind of meant as like, it's a double-edged sword, like high expectations produces like high achievers, and there's some good about that and some bad. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
So oftentimes when people use it, it's derogatory in my experience, in my body as an Asian woman. Because the perception culturally is that, we're too highly critical, basically, because when I would be in therapy, often my therapists were white women, and they would be like, that's horrible. But I would hold the cultural thing of like, but this is my family and this is what I'm supposed to do. So it was kind of like, I didn't feel understood. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the trauma that looks like culture, okay, now is for my family of origin, the Cultural Revolution was profoundly harmful in the sense of when communism took over, the borders closed.
Mm-hmm.
So the ways that people could leave, or if they were top performers in school and could get accepted to universities outside of the country, or they were top performers in companies and they would get sponsorships to leave. So being the top performer was survival.
Wow.
So trauma decontextualized now looks like culture, high achieving Asian students.
Wow. Oh my God.
Does that make sense? What's happening, Pancho?
Oh no, I mean this is I'd not thought about this before. You're now that you seeing me in the moment.
We're watching it happen.
So
Yeah. Me
it's
too. Me
happening as you
too.
speak. And I'm also curious about we have several parallels. I'm from Mexico. I was born in Mexico, and I come from I would say either a lower middle class or upper lower class family in Mexico. I think had I not come here illegally and had my mom not basically, created miracles to give me the life I have, I'd be driving taxi cabs in Mexico City right now.
Yes.
So I have a lot of questions, and we can get into this later, but I have a lot of questions about how I might see myself differently given this kind of framework. But let's pause on that because you're in the middle of explaining this about yourself, and I don't want to take that detour right now.
I'm happy to take the detour. Let's see.
Yeah, we'll get there. But I'm curious
Okay.
about you. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So what happened was I wrote this book called The Boundary Revolution because I was separating from my husband, because I decided to blow up my family because I was like, well, I'm waking up suicidal. I either do it or I end the marriage that is making me miserable because I'm just pleasing everyone else around me except for me. Because I was separating, I needed to increase my income so I could be a single parent of 2 kids. Trauma decontextualized, right? Women couldn't open up bank accounts until 1974. So the pressure of being a single parent, single woman, person of color, and then coming out as queer on top of it was highly stressful for me. So I wrote this book as a way of increasing my credibility. But what happened was I better understood what I was actually doing with my clients because I was weighing it down. Because in my clinical work, my trauma work, I was just following intuition with all the clinical training, but I didn't have a framework. The book actually made me create a framework. And then when I saw the framework, I couldn't unsee it in the work that I was doing, you know? Because the other piece that I forgot to talk about was the thing that pushed me over the edge was during the pandemic, the reimbursement rates from the insurance companies increased dramatically.
Yeah.
So I was on insurance panels. It would be like $65 reimbursement rate per session I would offer a client. During the pandemic, it went up to 90. Why? You know, other clinicians were like, this is fantastic. I'm getting so much more money. And I'm like, I'm fucking pissed. I hope I can curse on your thing.
Yes.
The reason why I was so pissed, because they could have been paying from the beginning. It was the same argument that I would have with my then husband. When I would fight and argue, then he would do the extra labor.
Mhm.
And he's like, well, what? And I'm like, you could have been doing it from the beginning. It's systemic, you know? So it was like everything was like this big issue that I felt like I had to fight. And so the other reason why I needed to write a book was because I was going to take myself off insurance panels because I didn't want anything to do with any system anymore. And I just started decolonizing everything from the inside out. So that kind of gets me to this place. So I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
So many.
Colonizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just so that we can address the question mark listeners might have when you say decolonizing everything, what do you mean when you say decolonizing? What does that term mean?
So the way that I use it is decolonizing is the source wounding in my mind of all of this mess that we're in currently that has been historically perpetuated is settler colonialism, meaning European nations would settle into lands and take over, colonize, which would mean the people who lived there were either murdered, genocide, or they were then converted to take on the traits of the colonizer. So decolonizing means to unlearn all of the program that resulted from being colonized on the land and in the people.
Your practice specifically as a therapist, and then in your life, what did that look like on a practical, specific to you level?
So I have because I have ADHD and I'm a visual learner, so I always bring props when I'm working with people. So these are 2 circles. These are felt circles for folks who can't see the video, and they're the same size. And so this is how I explain embodied boundaries is that everyone is in same size, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, class, anything. Everyone is equally valuable no matter. As an example, in my family, because my mom's trauma was so big, she took up this bigger sized circle, right?
Yeah.
And me as the child in that family was a smaller size circle. So in some ways, my mom was the oppressor and I was the oppressed. She was the perpetrator and I was the victim from that perspective, okay? What happens is in society that's been colonized, right? There is an oppressor, meaning people who deserve more access to resources than others. So white man, I'm just going to generalize, okay? And marginalized communities, the smaller circle. Okay, so this dynamic lives not only externally, but internally too. So what happens is if I stay in a small size circle after a while, it is going to make 100% sense that at some point I'm going to blow my top and I'm now going to be the bigger circle. And the other person, which tended to be my husband at the time, became the smaller size circle. I would vilify and demean that he was horrible, and he would then become the victim. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So now what happens is, and this is what we're seeing in society now, is we just jump back from oppressor, victim, big size circle, small size circle, and then we perpetuate the harm when we do that damage ourselves. We go back and forth, back and forth. Who's the victim? Who's the perpetrator? Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's good? Who's bad? Who's in? Who's out? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 So the work that I do that has been transformative in my life is I right size.
The circle.
I right size the circle. So if I'm in my rage as a mom, because I've told my kids 50,000 times to do this thing, right? I need to small size my circle, right? I need to bring my circle size down, contain myself, and grow their circle size because they are in their humanity. They are still learning, and I am not allowed to speak about them or to them with disrespect. With frustration, yes, but not with vilification. Does that make sense? So every single day, I'm constantly right-sizing people. When my kids blow up at me, I have to shrink them down, and then I grow myself up. And I don't say that I'm a horrible parent because my kids don't know how to do this thing and I'm a failure.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or if they're disrespectful, I, shrink their circle size down, and they're not a perpetrator. They're not selfish. They're not bad. So it's constantly when I'm interacting with people in the grocery store or when I'm driving and someone cuts me off, same size circle. Maybe there's an emergency. What happens is because I'm maintaining the same size with everyone around me at all times, I save so much energy. Because I view everyone in their humanity, I give them the benefit of the doubt, and I give myself the benefit of the doubt. And so I'm able to stay much more regulated. The issue is everything feels like life and death right now because of how stressed people are.
Yeah.
So it's harder to stay regulated in my prefrontal cortex, right? Especially because right now, more than any other time in my mind, everyone's generational trauma is activated.
Yeah.
Because of what's happening globally, and especially in the US right now.
It felt like there were two parts of what you were bringing to us that you can't unsee. There's the power dynamics that are everywhere.
Yes.
And this is like we're having a collective mind blown moment of like the circles, the bigger, the smaller, then the smaller gets bigger and like, oh my God. So lots of questions there. But the other part of what you brought to us is epigenetics. And you
Yes.
just started to get into it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what epigenetics is
Mm-hmm.
and how it interacts with what you can't unsee?
Yes. Okay, so first off, because not everyone knows what epigenetics is, there's this research on lab mice, and they would release the scent of cherry blossoms, and then the lab mice would get shocked. Cherry blossom scent, shocked. Cherry blossom scent, shocked. They bred those mice, and then they bred those baby mice to have babies. And the two generations that never got shocked ever, when they would smell the cherry blossom scent, scatter to the edge of the cage. So epigenetics is the expression that the change in behavior and in the DNA due to trauma. So connecting it to survivors
that you never experienced, like you
that they've never experienced.
and your parents didn't experience it. So it's not like, oh,
but it's a behavioral change.
It's great grandparents experienced
Yes,
it. And I am still
100%.
fleeing from the cherry blossom scent.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
this is the same for survivors of the Holocaust. Grandchildren of the survivors of Holocaust present with PTSD.
Without experiencing it.
Without experiencing the horrors. The reason is, in my mind, how I explain it to my clients is your body remembers and it's just trying to keep you safe. What happens is if you don't land the charge, is how I explain it. If you don't land the intensity in the right spot historically, you're going to think you're crazy. Your kids are going to go, what's the big deal, Mom? It was just a thing, you know? And the rage, the fear of someone dying when you didn't get home on time is outsized, right? Because they're not understanding the context from which this response is coming from.
So you didn't experience the trauma. Your body didn't experience the trauma. Your body wasn't there, right? What is the mechanism by which your body or the mice 2 generations removed from cherry blossom equals shock in experience and lived experience, what's the mechanism that leads to someone's descendants experiencing the same traumatic reaction to the traumatic stimulus that their ancestors had?
This is a great question that I'm not going to be able to answer scientifically, but it's basically if the behavior in the moment of the trauma helped them survive, it's going to be programmed in the nervous system in the future. If you smell cherry blossom scent, do this. Does that make sense? So if you raise your anxiety level, like so for the survivors of the Holocaust, if you're hyper vigilant all of the time, this might not happen. Right? So it's your body's wiring to try to keep you alive. The issue is if it starts to impede on your living. Because if I keep scattering to the side of the cage when it's cherry blossoms, I'm not going to enjoy the cherry blossoms. I'm just going to keep being
Right.
stressed, right? I'm not going to be able to be in the present moment because my body is always in hypervigilance, so it doesn't get hurt again.
We are remarkably adaptive creatures, and evolution happens sometimes over hundreds of generations, and sometimes the changes can take effect at the genetic level. Like your genes change while you're alive, and
Yes.
then you have children,
Mhm.
and it goes. And so the epigenetic part of it is not all of those genes that you inherit get expressed. Sometimes it takes a shock or a change or chronic stress
Yes.
to start to express that gene that you have inherited. And so this is when we can go into this later, but this is why we see folks with inherited trauma, especially folks of color, after lifetimes of both inherited stress, but also just lived stress in a people of color in a racist system are going to experience stress. We see physical health deterioration and cancer being diagnosed at later stages earlier, diseases of old age coming on earlier, like dementia, Alzheimer's, heart disease in 30s, 40s. And we know that it's in part because those genes got turned on because of stress. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So I kind of pull in lots of different ways of thinking in the work that I do. So when you talked about like heart conditions or, chronic health issues,
Metabolic, yeah.
I will look at Louise Hay has this book called You Can Heal Your Body. Your body's always trying to communicate to you. So if you have heart issues, you want to look ancestrally if there was a broken heart somewhere. If you have chronic inflammation, you want to look in yourself and ancestrally if there was anger that was never allowed to be expressed because it was dangerous to your people. So your body is constantly communicating, please listen, And so we've been taught, because in the US, it's like productivity over all else, is to ignore the body.
When these things happen, when you are predisposed to have something happen in your life, a gene gets flipped, your nervous system all of a sudden starts behaving in a way that's different and potentially completely out of reasonable behavior for the context you're in. People look at you and say, "What is wrong with your personality?"
Exactly.
But it has nothing to do with your personality. It has to do with your ancestry. and the
Yes.
genetic makeup that you carry from people multiple generations back who had something terrible happen to them.
hmm So let me land it in a different context as an example, okay? I remember my kids would be like, Mom, why are you so stressed out all the time? You're always so cranky, right? And then it's like, invisible labor, right? So the context here is patriarchy, right? But we can't explain it to the kids, right? And very rarely, it's a little bit more now, that men don't understand how much invisible emotional labor women carry historically, right? And so it's like, it looks like character, it looks like personality that mom's so stressed out and high strung all the time, but it actually is contextualized within the systems of patriarchy. Does that make sense? So I want to land it in, so, because in case someone's like feeling just my ancestry, no, there's the ancestry of like patriarchy, like these systems of oppression that have created power differentials, like this big size circle, small size circle, that gets ingrained in us, pattern in us behaviorally, because we are supposed to behave that way. So it's not just genetics, it's trained behavior, actually. It's both.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the sake of not alienating somebody who could be seen as the person in a position of power, for men who are listening to this, because I've been in a place where I hear something like that and I go, well, like, why are you casting me as a bad guy, right?
Right. Beautiful. I love this.
What's the dynamic for somebody who is potentially feeling attacked by what you just said because they are a white cis man?
I will often go, thank you so much for letting me know that you're feeling attacked. What I'm talking about is something that's not on you, right? So another thing that I work with people on is I remove the system from the body. So what do I mean? When I'm working with couples and they're like, the patriarchy. And I'm like, okay, let's put the patriarchy behind your husband on a sheet of paper, and you land all of your rage on the sheet of paper that says patriarchy, but do not land it on the body. Because the bodies are the ones acting out the system. But where your rage is on the system, not on the human being. So in that moment, I'm same sizing. Because we over-identify ourselves sometimes with the system, right? We often protect the company instead of understanding the company doesn't protect us, right? It's an enrollment that happens. We buy into a system thinking that it's going to give us safety, and it's not. It's just giving us a cog in the wheel, right? So if someone's feeling defensive, I say, fantastic. That is your breadcrumb. Go chew on it and start digging, right? So if there's defensiveness on being attacked, I would go, how would you feel in your relationship with your primary caregiver? Did you feel attacked, right? Would they criticize you in a way that didn't feel fair? Go look there, right? So what I'm doing is any kind of nervous system activation is a breadcrumb. And I am always excited when people are reactive, defensive, shut down, if it happens in me too, because I know it's something that I can look for and figure out what's happening. Because there's nothing wrong with me. This is a phrase I use. Nothing wrong with you. What is the data telling you?
Yeah. It's Judy, it's interesting. One of the things that I'm hoping my voice is going to stay through this podcast. So one of the things that this brings up is Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, is I recommend to anybody. It's just sort of, for me, it was a real life-changing book. Further, you brought up the quotes of trauma decontextualized, as personality. The thing that really blew my mind on that book, though, was white people have collective intergenerational trauma too.
100%.
Really F's us up.
Yes.
And it's like in a big way. I mean, with
I will both trigger warning this and say that I'm not going to get into the real detail that he gets into, but think about, yes, there has been violence perpetrated by white people. Think about what it was like to be that white person participating in that violence, walking
Yes.
by that violence,
Yes.
seeing that. It hits, it stays. And I've had, as a white person generally, I've been just sort of not aware of my own culture other than my own family culture, but I'm Hungarian. And I remember talking to my grandmother, first generation Hungarian, and she said something offhand about her grandfather. The Pauls that came over from Hungary, and many generations at a time, the whole family system came over. And her grandfather brought their whole family over. And he didn't like it. And he left. He went back to Hungary. And I said, "What? What what happened to him?" And she said, "Well, I think he froze to death." I was like, "What? What?"
Mhm.
And now I'm like, no wonder we're so psychotically tight about family. It's just the St. Michael's Perth Amboy Church parish. It's just the Hungarians in this little part of Metuchen in New Jersey, and right here. And I've loved my family unit and how just unconditional we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
And sometimes it's suffocating. And now I'm
Yes.
oh, it's because when you leave, you freeze to death. And so we don't let people leave. We're
Mhm.
in it.
Mhm.
We're not letting you
Mhm.
leave.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one story, let alone what else I'm handed down by my Irish English other side.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. And whiteness is not a culture. So whiteness is the illness. Exactly, 100%. So Resmaa Menakem talks of, so if I bring back my circles, right? If someone has access to more resources, so they're bigger size circle, they're not human.
Mhm.
Same size circles is you're in your full humanity. You understand your limits, you understand your worth. That's unconditional to how much you have or not, right? So if someone's in big size all the time, they're often overcompensating for feeling small size for parts of their life.
Yeah.
Okay? So just quickly, no one migrates because they want to. Okay? So on Turtle Island here in the US,
Mm.
ships came over filled with people who were poor with the promise of a better opportunity here. They were funded by venture capitalists in Europe. Okay? And so having them do the dirty work of taking over the land and harming the indigenous folks here and all those things, their bodies were used to take over the land. That is called moral injury. Okay? So not only, Kim, you were saying people doing it and then other people witnessing it happen and allowing it to happen because they don't want to freeze to death. So better take over someone else's resources than them dying, right? That decision is a moral injury of, I'm doing this to survive. And this is one of the reasons why I tell my clients, you cannot judge your parents. You cannot judge the choices that your ancestors made because you have no idea what you would do in that situation. What we need to do is just say the truth. My ancestors killed these people and we benefited from it. It's neutral. Acknowledging the truth, hanging in there with all of the waves of emotion that comes through will allow that trauma to dissolve and you can integrate it. Okay? And so the big thing here is all we have to do is name the truth and stay in same size circle with everybody. Me doing that harm doesn't shrink my circle size down. It does not make me bad. I'm accountable for the behavior, but I am not a bad person, right? So it's like that constant practice of same sizing, holding myself accountable, same sizing, holding the other person accountable, same sizing. That's the way that we're going to digest the collective trauma that we need to in order to stop replicating it in our lives right now. Because it's repetition compulsion. It's the Jungian thing.
Mm.
If we don't heal it, we keep repeating it because the body's longing to heal. What we're seeing globally is a collective body. We are trying to heal it because we keep repeating the trauma.
Can you define repetition compulsion for
Mhm.
folks?
Let me see if I can find a benign example. I'm not going to find a benign example. I'm going to use one because I think it's real that people don't talk about. I work with young women who have had some sexual assault in college, right? So what can happen is if someone goes through that, unconsciously, they will put themselves in situations that increase the risk of it happening again.
Mm.
So when I'm working with someone and they're like, but this is multiple times, it's something wrong with me, or men are not safe. I'm like, oh no, this is a repetition compulsion. Your body is actually putting
Wow.
you in similar situations so that you can heal it, right?
Yeah.
So we repeat it to try to break the cycle so we can learn from it and not do it again.
This is like you marry your parents.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
You're only going to marry the good and bad parts of your parents. You're not going to be attracted to the people who aren't like them because
'Cause
that's
it's
not the
comfort. It
healing
feels
that
like
needs to
home.
happen. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. So we, on a global level, on a collective level, are experiencing repetition compulsions.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make that real for us? What
Yeah.
is
Okay. So the start of the nation, right, was colonizing the indigenous, right, bringing over Africans, okay? And then when they got their freedom, we needed a new source of labor.
Mm.
So we brought in Irish folks you
Mhm.
know. And so what happened to the dehumanization of the indigenous and the African enslaved people was they did that to the Irish. So the immigrant community, the incoming community that we brought in for that labor, we needed to dehumanize so we could extract from their bodies over and over and over again. And so when they got their freedom or they moved in, another group of immigrants came in. So right now, what's happening with ICE is this vilification of a certain group of people as being bad. Because what's happening is the systems are trying to stay in power right now. So it's detracting and putting it on the bodies of somebody that we can kind of use as scapegoats. I don't know if does that land
Yeah.
it in the present moment?
Yeah. And what would a resolution, a healing of that repetitive cycle look like?
One, you would have to stop it. And then two, the reconciliation work of, I did this thing as an ICE agent. I did this thing. I kidnapped because I took this order because I needed money from my family. They promised me a lot of money to do this, and I did this thing. And I destroyed this family, or I harmed this person. And then that person's able to say, you harmed me. This is the result. It cost me this. I lost my job. I lost my husband. I lost my whatever, right? It's that reconciliation work of just naming the truth and hanging in there. There's no other way, because part of this, to heal, we need to grieve. It's the grief work that is not done. Like, we didn't even do any grieving around COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We lost so many people during the pandemic, and collectively, we did not touch the grief at all. We just kept moving on. When we do not grieve, it stays stuck in the muscle memory. Right?
Yeah.
So something I keep telling my clients is we're not here to heal everything. We're here to live. And if something gets in the way of our living, our liberation, our joy, then we clear it. Right? So if I'm not able to leave my home because I'm anxious because I look this way and I might be perceived as non-American, right? That means I'm not able to live my life. So I'm going to clear that. I have to acknowledge that it's not safe outside right now for people who are looking like they're immigrants, who are perceived as foreigners, quote unquote. And for me and my body, I need to clear out the ancestry work of what happened to the Chinese immigrants in the US. After they built the railroads, they were refused any kind of status. They were not allowed to bring women. The hope was that they would not procreate, so they would die off. This is the truth of our nation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these systemic patterns that keep repeating themselves are resolved at the individual level on a
100%.
person-to-person context.
Yes.
Ooh.
If I can do it within, I can do it without. So it's peace from the inside out.
Yeah.
So that's what I do in my groups. So I started groups because I realized you cannot heal this on a one-on-one level. Like I can do it with my clients one-on-one in their lives, right? But a lot of my work is, you're not special. You're not crazy. This is not you. They're like, no, you just say that to everybody. Now in the groups, someone will say they're struggling with something. I'm like, let's pause. Anyone else on the call struggle with this? Everyone's hands are up. I'm like, oh, we're at 90%.
Look at that.
Look at that. I wonder why that is. Is it because of the system that we all live in, right? Trauma decontextualized looks like culture. What happens is, as I'm working with one person now, clearing out whatever the ancestry is, if it's relevant, the entire group gets the healing because witnessing someone clearing it out touches into your nervous system and you get to clear it out at the same time. Because we're all connected. We are all connected. My liberation is tied to your liberation. Right? So witnessing that, we keep throwing in these terms. Mirror neurons in our brain don't know the difference between witnessing and experiencing it ourselves. So witnessing reconciliation, witnessing someone grieving, processing this trauma will bring in healing and nutrients into our own system as well.
Yeah. There's so many places to go, but I'm curious, Pancho, if you are willing to go where we left off about 30 minutes ago.
Yeah. No, I'm reflecting on this a lot. I have two main topics of reflection that are coming up, and I think I can tie them together. The first one, in you sharing the framework in which a little circle, the oppressed, a big circle, the oppressor, or maybe we want to say the abused and the abuser, whatever. They trade roles. It's almost like the pendulum swings back and forth.
Yes.
I'm thinking about that and thinking about how, to come back to the last episode we just recorded, which hasn't released, but it will soon. We talked a lot about justice and how true justice is co-created. Everybody gets together and says, here's what it looks like for us collectively, right? So it's almost it's very much in parallel with what you're talking about. And how, if that doesn't happen, I feel like almost everybody is a victim of the system. It's almost like the little circle and the big circle. Yes, in the micro dynamics of those two people or those two groups, there is an abuser and an abused. But taking a step back, everyone is getting fucked over.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking about that. And I have a couple of questions about that. But to speak specifically about myself, coming from Mexico, I was born in Mexico City and I moved here as an illegal, undocumented immigrant when I was 7, and my mom ended up having to marry a man she didn't love in order to create economic stability for ourselves.
Yes.
And we got lucky in that we were able to gain residency and then eventually citizenship. Um, I don't feel like in a lot of ways I am a California boy, but in a lot of ways I don't feel like I ever was. And then I also look at Mexico and the Mexican culture, and some very young foundational part of me identifies with it. But there are so many parts of that whole, cultural situation that are repulsive to me.
Mm.
And one of those is machismo.
Yes.
So Mexico has I took a cultural studies course on Mexico in college. Mexico has a history of losing since it was created as a country. They've just always been the punching bag.
Yes.
France invaded Mexico on a whim, and then the US beat the shit out of Mexico in the Mexican American War. And they had a revolution where, like the Mexican Revolution and Civil War was just as gnarly as the US one. And so Mexico
Yes.
carries all of this defeat in its cultural makeup. Trauma decontextualizes culture.
Yes.
And and what it results in is machismo. It
Yes.
results in this culture of I need to find something that leaves me feeling like I am not always going to lose.
Yes.
I need to feel proud of myself. And, like a very real and concrete and kind of funny example that my wife and I often make fun of Mexico is we're driving went to bed the last time we went back to visit, we were driving to a museum. And we were in the car with my mom. My mom's a woman, but still, she grew up in Mexico. She carries some of this in how she is. Um, and we drove past this flag. It's like a massive flag. And she looks at it and she goes, "That's the biggest flag in all of the continental Americas." And says it like it's this thing to be really proud of. I'm like, who the fuck cares how big a flag is, But Mexicans will look for any little thing to be proud of and be like, oh yeah, we're the best. There's a shopping mall, and it's the biggest shopping mall in all of Central and South America, and it's like a half a mile from my grandparents' house. And they will brag about it to no end. What the fuck does a shopping mall have to say about you as a person? But you're proud of it because you're just grasping for any little thing to be proud of, to feel like you are not the one who is being oppressed or abused.
100%.
So
can I show you in circles?
I'll pause there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is our president, right? So when a child is taught to be small, right? Shamed, blamed, not good enough, defective, there is this wounding that keeps them small, okay? And immediately, if someone feels vulnerable in this place, a victim, their own internal part comes in. So it's small size is too vulnerable. So they're big size. Okay. So now this is the internal work that I'm sharing with you. This is a wounded child that has no power. This is the adaptive teenager who tries to drive the bus and take over. So this is internal family systems work right now, where the teenager's like, no, I am the best. I am better than you. And that's the machismo that you're talking about that covers up the vulnerability of losing over and over and over again and being bullied by the bulliers. Does that make sense? So bullies were bullied. So if someone was bullied, they turn into the bully. And that's what we have in our Oval Office right now.
Mm.
And we can trace that in his ancestry, right? We can trace that. I will bet all of my money we will trace that into the billionaires' ancestries as well.
Yeah. And just on the Mexico example, this is trauma without context. Cultural or country level is culture. It's the epigenetics and the genetics of loss after loss. Handed
Yes.
down
Yes.
for hundreds of years. Millennia,
Yes.
in some cases.
So that was my first thought. My second thought was coming back to the Holocaust example and thinking about this pendulum and seeing, I mean, regardless of whether you agree with what the country of Israel is doing right now and the situation in Palestine,
Yes.
objectively, it's hard to argue with the fact that the descendants of the victims of the Holocaust are perpetrating a very similar act upon a different
100%.
population.
Yes.
Whether you want to agree that they're in the right for doing it or that they're in the wrong for doing it, who the good guys or bad guys are, just objectively, like, you can't argue with the events that are happening and the parallels that they, it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like an echo, but the pendulum has now swung in the other direction to where they are the ones doing the abuse as opposed to having the abuse perpetrated on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that
Mhm.
repetition compulsion, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I don't get to resolve it and grieve the losses that happened, I am destined to repeat it. So that's what cycle breaking is, right? It's like breaking the cycle, healing and grieving what was lost, what actually happened, so I can release it from my body and honor the dead by doing that, versus continuing on perpetuating the same harm to try to get a different outcome.
For people who are listening to this and wondering how they can notice this in themselves, because I would suspect they may see it as personality in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's happening in you doesn't mean you're going to be able to contextualize it as trauma. You'll contextualize it as this is just who I am. So if grief and reconciliation are what's necessary and it needs to happen at the personal level, what is the behavior or
Mm-hmm.
the things that are masquerading as personality traits that they might be able to notice in themselves and then can recognize, like, okay, this is a signpost that I might need to do some grieving. I may need to do some reconciliation. The very first thing that came to mind for me was pride,
Say
but
more.
that's just a guess. Well, I mean, machismo presents as pride. Um, I would imagine, coming back to the example of the country of Israel,
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
pride to that identity, and
Mm-hmm.
they've consolidated it in a nation. Um, and I think it's more than just pride, but there seems to be some aspect of like taking pride in one's personality traits
Mm-hmm.
that may not actually be personality traits, but it may be trauma masquerading as personality or culture
Mm-hmm.
because we're not seeing it in the context of our ancestry.
Yeah. I'm going to just keep it super simple. If you ever feel better than someone or worse than someone,
Mm.
then you're in trauma.
Wow. Judy, what a mic drop. Yeah.
If you ever feel better than someone or worse than someone, then you're in trauma. Because that means you are measuring by a level of excellence that has been stated somewhere. And that's really sad, because what happens is there's value placed on one more than another, right? One is better than another. So anytime you're feeling better than someone, you want to small size your circle to the right size. You want to shrink that down so you can get to your humanity, because you are no better and no worse than any single person on this planet, no matter what you do, including harm other people. It does not impact your humanity or your value. And if you ever feel worse than anyone else, you want to grow your circle size to the same size and remind yourself that there's nothing you can do or say that will make your value diminish at all, including harm someone. And so that would be the practice. If I ever feel better or worse than anyone, then that is a breadcrumb to look at, to look for. And what I do is, when I feel bad, I love that part of myself. I look for where I felt bad in that. So I try to zoom out. I zoom out a lot and I look for the dynamic. If I feel incompetent, I'll look for times that I felt incompetent, and then I'll look at the times in my ancestry that felt incompetent. And in that moment, I will just love that part and go, I'm so sorry. You were made to feel so bad about yourself. People needed to do that to control you because they were also insecure. And I'm so sorry that you carry it, and I release it from this body now.
Mm,
And that's all I do throughout my day. Oh, look at that theme. Oh, interesting.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are all stories that we make up, right? And I'm better than or
100%.
worse than because of a story. So
Yes.
it's almost like, I'm sorry you held on to that story.
Hmm.
We can release that.
But
Yeah,
you
I
want to
love this.
validate it. Yeah. You want to validate that there was part of you that took it on,
Totally.
right? Makes sense that you took it on. And I'm so sorry it wasn't on you.
Kim, I feel like I'm monopolizing the questioning
I
here
love
because
it.
I'm so
No.
fascinated. What's coming up for you?
I could listen to you guys talk for forever because this is a really powerful experience for me as somebody who like I know about it, but like I don't have the same history that you two share. And it's super powerful to watch the connections happen. Um, so that's cool. Thank you. Thank you to both you and Pancho especially for like putting the pieces together here with us and like bringing it out. Oh my God. So much that I didn't know. So thank you.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, I want to share one quote that I just read today actually that's coming up for me. And then Judy, I want to ask you like how this actually happens, but I have like a different way of asking it because I think so many of us are just so burnt out by fighting systems that are not going to be fought. And just like, I don't know how to get the ice Asians to grieve. So anyway, I'm gonna come back to that. But Ross Douthat in the New York Times today, he is a generally conservative columnist who writes for the New York Times. A really thoughtful guy. And one of his quotes today, the article that came out today was about the rightward shift for young men and where it comes from and what the roots are. And he was like, it's a lot simpler than people think. It's because we systemically unprivilege them in the job market. And there were
Unprivileged who?
white men, especially young white men. Um, in the past 20, 30 years, it became harder and harder and harder for an average to above average, young, especially white man, to get hired for a job or to be placed somewhere with a secure income. As many of the institutions, and he specifically references some cultural and arts institutions were like, he said, since there in the New Yorker, I think, I forget since what year, but there has not been a white man born after 1984 who has written in the New Yorker. And I think it was maybe in the fiction section, but it was some like, okay. And his point was there has been not just we are going to even the playing field, we are going to systematically reverse the hundreds of years when the situation was the opposite. We are going to now, from in his words and the words of other people that he's been describing, we are going to systematically privilege people of color, and
Interesting.
and the resentment that comes from that, and that the big change without like there's no off ramp, and so you've got a lot of disenfranchised, so young especially because the older 40, 50, 60 men they kept their job, they're already in power. Got a lot of people who don't, no matter right or wrong, you just have a lot of people who don't have power who used to. And so the line that caught me of like, is when you have been in power, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but when you have been in power, equity sounds like oppression.
Yeah.
Right. And we have been saying, like literally, this is my career, like in equity. We've been saying equity, meaning movement towards, you know, with the fans looking over the fence at the baseball stadium and trying to get everybody to be like, have an accessible height to view so you get different size boxes. And when there's no context, there's no off ramp, there's no just cultural context for processing the loss and making sense of it, bad things happen. And it's not to say like we are deserving of what is happening right now. It's just to say I can see the threads. I can see the logical threads of the circles getting bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller. And that circle that used to be big, that then got small, wants to be big again. And it's going to get big however it can. And that's what we have, part of what we have right now.
So interesting. So this is an editorial? Is that right? Okay. Because I would pull up all the boards, the people in power, and just take a look to see if it's actually changed.
The people in power, no, but it's the like pipeline. The people in power have stayed, right?
I would still look at the staffing, right?
Yeah.
So someone's perceived experience might not be accurate. And I'm not saying he's okay. So let's look at the circles again. So someone who is in a position of power, so big size circle, when you right size them down, their lived experience is going to be perceived like they're small size.
Yeah. A demotion.
And that's okay. That's actually really, really good because they need to work their nervous system to learn to tolerate the discomfort of not getting everything they want when they want it, just because they want it, right? So that learning to tolerate, they don't get everything they want, strengthens them. It pushes them for drive, right? So remembering that small sizing them to their right size and them being pissed, that anger is valuable. Okay, it's a breadcrumb for them to chew on, not something that's taken away from them, okay? Because they got too much power. When someone who is small size starts to come in their right size, like women, are going to feel like, oh, that was really bitchy. I should not have done that. I am oppressing. I'm taking up too much space now because their bodies are not used to taking up their right size space. Okay? I get riled up when there's these perceptions that there are fewer and fewer white men in the pipeline towards this position that they deserve, because it actually riles up that perception in those children who are actually chronically lonely. These white boys do not get connections to their fathers, oftentimes because their fathers are so fixated on money. So I kind of want to put it out there that I'd like to read the article because they're missing a lot of nuance in this, right? A lot of people are angry, not necessarily because of they're not getting what they deserve. They're being told that they're not getting what they deserve. And their loneliness, their chronic loneliness is weaponized.
Yeah.
Because someone who has been connected to and attuned by their parents will not be trying to get their size built up from something else because they would have been filled up from the parenting that they received.
Their loneliness is weaponized is huge.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Ancho.
Something that came to mind for me is you mentioned somebody who's oversized in how they're showing up. They're taking too much space. They are the one in the role of the abuser. And systematically, they are forced into a right-sized circle. And that's unpleasant. And there's anger there. Anger, I often look at what's the message that an emotion brings to the table. And then what is the resolution that emotion requires to be processed in a healthy way? So anger is a protective emotion. It's saying a boundary has been crossed, something that I care about is being taken away from me, that kind of a thing. in this case, it makes sense. I had it easy. I was able to succeed and get ahead in life in a way that was privileged, in a way that was it was just easier for me to get ahead in life. And systemically, that's less so now, right? I don't know where we are in terms of, have we reached equity? Are we getting there? Have we overcorrected? I'm not going to take a stance on that. I don't know enough.
Mhm.
But I think it is fair to say that, I mean, just looking at college graduation rates, or just like the gender, um, spread in college, there are more women in college now than men. So that has flipped, right? That's just data. And so they're angry because now it's harder. It's as hard as it is for other people, or at least closer to as hard as it is for other people. What needs to happen with that anger?
Great question.
Because that seems like the crux of it for me, right? Like, you could process, just like grief, you could process the anger and do what, like, learn from it. Like you said it's good for them. Well, it's not good for them if there's nobody there to show them what to do with that anger.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So the modeling of how to digest intense feelings that are vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, anger is a secondary emotion and it protects from fear or sadness usually. So being able to say it makes sense that you're angry. You're really scared of how you're going to make it. That makes sense. Right? And validating and sitting with them in that fear.
Yeah.
You're not alone. Look at all these other people who are stressed out. Reminds me of this reel I made that's kind of going a little bananas. And I was quoting an economist who was arguing that the new poverty level is 140,000 for a family of 4. I'm bringing this in to illustrate this point, right? So if someone is like a white man, is the example that we're using, is feeling like it's so much harder to get ahead because everyone else is getting the easier places to go. No, actually, no one's having an easier time right now. It's harder for everyone. You're just fixated on yourself, and people are actually feeding that line to you that it's harder for you than it has been. It's harder for everyone.
Yeah.
You're just not used to this hard because everyone else has been used to it. You're just now catching up to everyone else. So why am I bringing this up? The system is squeezing the life out of everybody. So the people who have not been used to being squeezed and learned to tolerate that discomfort are feeling more upset because they haven't had the practice of tolerating that discomfort and knowing that they're capable of surviving it. So sitting with that anger and that fear, and then the sadness too of, I know it's sad because it used to be easier. And I can sit there with you in that because I've gone through it. They've gone through it. And you're going to be able to get through it too. We're going to get through this together. Because if we start pitting us against each other, we're not going to get out of this. We're all suffering from this system, right? Not just a group of people that is being used specifically to divide, right? It's like a distraction from the larger picture, which is the 1% is pitting all these groups against each other, saying it's equity or it's this, or it's now too progressive or whatever. It's like, no. Let's look at the data. The data is there's resource hoarding, and that's why so many people are stressed out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of the system with which they hoard resources is extraction of labor. How much can
100%.
we get out of any single one of these individuals by dangling a carrot that is like a $20,000 a year promotion with, a 3-letter title after your name?
Yes, exactly. And so that's the thing, this decolonizing work, when you embody your humanity, like you go into same size, you start to view your body differently. You stop extracting from it like you've been taught generationally. You start protecting it because now you feel yourself as a precious human being instead of a human doing all the time, right? Have we been taught? So when you regain your sense of humanity and the humanity of each other and the preciousness of life in that way, we start to shift the collective.
I feel like we could dive into this for hours.
I know. I could talk about this all day.
There's so much more here, and Judy might be a repeat guest.
Awesome. I would love that.
It would be really nice for us. I've got one more. I don't know if it's a question anymore, but I want to get your response to it. But one of the things that I noticed when I think Pancha, you had asked, what do we do? Like, what do when the ICE agents have like perpetrated violence against families? How do you move on from that? And you had said, you stop and you grieve it and you honor it, you apologize, and you move through it. You let the feeling move through it. That is such a profoundly different experience than I think a lot of people have, and have access to be able to just, we wouldn't be here if that was available to them in the moment. My question was going to be, what's realistic? Like, what do you actually do and what do you expect to do? But I realize that that's not the question that I've been led to through this conversation. It's less of a question and more like, do I have this right? And the do I have this right is, it sounds like we can't compel those who have perpetrated violence or harm to do the work, to grieve, to stop necessarily. Courts can, but that's not going to do anything to the body. What we're doing is it's individual healing in community, but it's individual healing to be able to metabolize the raw grief and anger that come from that, but not let it run us, not let it, it's the swallowing poison and hoping other people die and not let it be the poison inside of us, which can sound so disempowering to be like, you can't do anything. You can't compel them. You can't, and there's tons of activists and many of us just are like light activists trying to make the world a better place. But realistically, we can't compel or control any other person to do a thing outside of, our legal system. And even then, can be so disempowering to know actually all you can do is metabolize this in a healthy way within you. Do I have that right? Would you add anything else to it?
I would add, sometimes my clients get annoyed with me because I'm always going back in history. And I'm like, we need to grieve this. They're like, no, but I want to talk about this thing. I'm like, this thing is going to feel very, very different when you process this thing. So when we go to the root, right? So a genocide happened to the people. So for my people, it was the Cultural Revolution. Billions of people died from starvation because Chairman Mao ordered everyone to melt the metal into bullets. Then they had nothing to cook or cut the food with. So people starved. The famine was incredible. I have them grieve that collective trauma to go, that died, or those people died. Nothing could have been done. It didn't happen. They died. So what happens is when you digest the atrocities of your history, of your childhood, of your family of origin, and your ancestors, when you digest that, you have so much more capacity for compassion and empathy and courage in the present moment. The reason why the majority of people will not talk about what's happening right now and will not look at it right now is because they don't have capacity.
There you go.
Because their nervous system is filled with this muck from generations back that has not been cleared. So what has happened with all of my clients, especially in the groups, because we do this every week, is we digest it, and their capacity for the discomfort as what's happening and their courage to be able to act now is so much greater because their channels are clear. Their body is clear from so much of the stuff they've been carrying without realizing it. And so now they've learned how to use their body to digest and find the data that they need to ingest and like move forward and inform their next decision or their next boundary, because they've cleared it up enough so that they don't get so confused anymore. They can feel the dynamic, they can understand what's happening and move in same sizeness with other people. So that would be the the adjustment that I would have. Less focus on right now, right? More work to clear out your history and understanding, to grow your capacity so you have much more space to deal with what's the stressing right now. It's not going to feel as stressful.
Mm.
Because when something's intense, I always tell my clients, it's 10% present moment, 90% past. When it's super intense, you're bringing your historical context here.
Ooh, that's a good thing to remember.
Yes. When I have couples who are like at war, I'm like, this is 10% present moment, 90% past. This is a pattern. Let's look at that, right? So it's like once you clear out the 90%, the 10% is a smaller issue, right? You have much more capacity to have a regulated conversation because you're not carrying all this baggage from from historical places.
It's like, is
I
that
used
a
to
fair,
joke
like,
that I
is that
was,
a fair heuristic
yeah.
to say, like, what's happening 10% now, 90% your past? Is that 10% now you, personality, or would you think of it differently?
I don't think there's like a hard and fast rule. What people are realizing is what they think is their personality isn't. It's their adaptations to be approved of by society.
Can we bring you back for an episode on identity?
Yeah.
Yes, please. I
Okay,
would love that.
awesome. Great. We'll put a pin in that. Kim, what were you going to share?
I used to joke that I was like 9 trauma responses in a trench coat. Like that was my personality.
That's basically what we are, right?
I'm reading Ingrid Clayton's book called Fawning right now. Do you know? It's beautiful. It's a fawning is for sure my like preferred trauma response. It's fawning. And so there's a part that you reminded me of with the circles of when somebody there's only so much space in a couple or family, there's only so much space. So when someone is taking up so much of it with their big circles big, you by definition have to get small to survive. And when you're a kid, it is a beautiful life-saving response to get
Yes.
small because that's how you survive. If you try to go big and there's another big circle in a container, someone's not making it out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
obviously the issue is trying to leave that in the past. Move on to a new response, but yeah. Yeah, it's a big part of my trench coat. It's funny, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, me too.
Judy, thank you. Is there anything that you haven't said or we haven't asked you about that feels important to share?
I think in case anyone got overwhelmed by our conversation or like, where do I start? I just want to say, just remember there's nothing wrong with you. If you just take that off the table completely, nothing wrong with you, nothing wrong with them. What is the data? If you take off character off the table, it will save you so much energy. Like there's something wrong with you, you're defective, you're not disciplined enough. Just take it off the table and say, there's nothing wrong with me, there's nothing wrong with them. What's the data? I'm overwhelmed. I have too many things to manage. I'm tired, right? Just start small, right? And know that you are unconditionally lovable. Your value is not conditioned on anything, despite what everything says around you in our society. I think that's the biggest thing as a takeaway.
And I'll say, as somebody who has battled like, so fawning, shame comes along with fawning. Oh my God, for so like it was so woven into me that I for sure couldn't see it. It was like, I had to get on a rocket ship to even get some space and like notice that there's Earth, that I was on the planet the whole time. It takes repetition. So like not only start small, you gotta do it over and over and over and over and over again to build a new neural pathway to be like, there's a small chance I'm not a piece of shit. Small. But let's go with it. Let's go with the hypothesis 1,000,000 times, and eventually it works out. It gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. But yeah, reps. Start small.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judy.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you.
Judy, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
It's been so fun to talk with you all. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We're looking forward to
Interesting.
another one.
Me too.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.